Picture this. You're 7 months pregnant, glowing at a charity gala in Dallas, when your husband's mistress walks in wearing the bracelet he promised your unborn child. But that's just the beginning of Madison Sterling's nightmare. What would you do if everyone you trusted was working to destroy you? Your husband, your best friend since college, even federal agents knocking at your door with fabricated evidence that could send you to prison for decades? Madison thought she married into the perfect fairy tale. A billionaire's son, a mansion in Dallas, a baby on the way. She had no idea she was actually marrying into a war zone. Because when you're worth billions, enemies don't just steal your money. They steal your identity, your reputation, your very reality. Using cutting-edge technology that can make you confess to crimes you never committed, in your own voice, with your own face. But Madison's father-in-law, Robert Sterling, didn't build an empire by letting people destroy his family, and he's about to teach everyone a lesson about what happens when you underestimate a pregnant woman who refuses to break. This isn't just a story about infidelity. This is about corporate espionage, deepfake videos, and a conspiracy so sophisticated it almost worked. Almost. Stay with me for the next hour because I guarantee the final twist will leave you speechless. Trust me, you've never heard a revenge story quite like this one. Madison Hayes Sterling adjusted the flowing sapphire fabric of her maternity gown as she stepped out of the black Mercedes at the Dallas Country Club. 7 months pregnant and glowing under the Texas evening sky, she looked every inch the perfect billionaire's wife. The Sterling Foundation Charity Gala was the social event of the season, and tonight she was the star. "You look radiant, darling," Tyler Sterling whispered in her ear, his hand possessively on the small of her back. At 30, Tyler had the kind of rugged handsomeness that graced magazine covers. Oil, money, and good genetics had blessed him with everything except character. Madison smiled up at her husband, her free hand resting on her rounded belly. "Our son is already making his presence known. He's been kicking all afternoon." Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let's hope he settles down for the evening. Father hates disruptions at his events." As they walked through the ornate lobby, Madison caught fragments of whispered conversations that followed in their wake. "That's Madison Hayes, you know, the little nobody from East Texas who trapped Tyler Sterling. 7 months along and still beautiful. Some women have all the luck." I heard Robert Sterling wasn't thrilled about the marriage initially. Madison's spine straightened. She'd heard these whispers for 2 years now, ever since she'd married Tyler, in what the society pages called a whirlwind romance. What they didn't know was that she'd been a high school teacher making $30,000 a year when Tyler swept her off her feet with private jets and designer dresses. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the cream of Dallas society. Oil executives mingled with tech moguls, their wives dripping in diamonds and barely concealed competition. Madison had learned to navigate these waters, but tonight something felt different. There was an undercurrent of anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for a show. "Madison, sweetheart," came a gravelly voice behind her. She turned to see Robert Sterling approaching, all 6 feet 4 inches of him, commanding attention without effort. At 65, Steele Sterling was still the most formidable man in any room. His gray eyes missed nothing, and tonight they were studying her with unusual intensity. "Hello, Robert," Madison said, accepting his brief embrace. "Wonderful turnout tonight." "Indeed." His gaze lingered on her face. "You look tired. This pregnancy is taking its toll." Tyler stepped closer. "Madison's been emotional lately. Pregnancy hormones, you know." Something flickered in Robert's eyes. "Has she now? Interesting." Before Madison could respond, a ripple of whispers swept through the nearby crowd. She followed their gazes to the ballroom entrance and felt her blood turn to ice. Striding through the doors like she owned the place was Scarlett Valentine. At 26, Scarlett was everything Madison was not. Tall, blonde, and surgically enhanced to perfection, she moved with the calculated grace of a woman who'd weaponized her beauty. Her red dress clung to every curve, and her social media following of 2.3 million hung on her every manufactured moment. "What is she doing here?" Madison whispered, her hand instinctively tightening on Tyler's arm. Tyler's face had gone pale. "I have no idea. She's not on the guest list." But Robert Sterling was smiling, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Actually, she is. I added her this afternoon. Thought it would be interesting to meet Tyler's business associate. Madison's world tilted. Business associate? Tyler had mentioned Scarlett exactly twice, both times dismissing her as a social media influencer who occasionally promoted Sterling Industries products. The way he'd said it had made her sound barely worthy of notice. Scarlett glided toward them, her phone held high as she live-streamed to her followers. Hey, beautiful people! Scarlett here at the most exclusive charity event in Texas, about to meet some very important people. She stopped directly in front of their group, her predatory smile fixed on Madison. Madison Sterling, you look absolutely glowing. Pregnancy suits you perfectly. Thank you, Madison managed, her voice steady despite the warning bells screaming in her head. Scarlett's gaze dropped to Madison's belly with theatrical fascination. Tyler's told me so much about the baby. He's beyond excited to be a father. Aren't you, baby? The endearment hung in the air like poison gas. Madison felt Tyler stiffen beside her, watched his face cycle through panic, guilt, and desperate calculation. Scarlett, Tyler said carefully, I'd like you to meet my father, Robert Sterling. Oh, we've already met, Scarlett purred, extending a manicured hand to Robert. Mr. Sterling called me personally this afternoon, said he was eager to finally meet me properly. Madison stared at her father-in-law, but his expression revealed nothing. He was watching this unfold like a chess master contemplating his next move. Well, Madison said, fighting to keep her voice level, it was lovely meeting you, Scarlett. I hope you enjoy the evening. She started to turn away, but Scarlett's voice stopped her cold. Oh, Madison, before you go. Tyler left something at my apartment last week. His watch, the Patek Philippe with the engraving from his father. I keep forgetting to give it back. The words hit Madison like a physical blow. That watch was Tyler's most prized possession, a gift from Robert when Tyler graduated from Harvard. Tyler never took it off except to shower. Madison turned back slowly, her eyes searching Tyler's face. He looked like a man facing execution. That's impossible, Madison said quietly. Tyler's been wearing his watch every day. Scarlett tilted her head with mock confusion, then glanced at Tyler's wrist. His sleeve had ridden up, revealing bare skin where the watch should be. Oh dear, Scarlett said with venomous sweetness. This is awkward. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications and shattered illusions. Around them, the party continued, but Madison felt as if she were drowning in a spotlight. Tyler finally found his voice. Madison, I can explain. But Madison was no longer looking at her husband. She was staring at Robert Sterling, whose gray eyes held something that looked almost like approval. The game had begun, and Madison was just beginning to understand that she wasn't a player. She was the prize. The ride home from the charity gala passed in suffocating silence. Madison stared out the window at the Dallas skyline, her hands clasped protectively over her belly, while Tyler gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. The confrontation with Scarlett played on repeat in her mind, each detail more damning than she'd initially realized. Madison, Tyler began as they pulled into their Preston Hollow mansion, about tonight, don't. Madison's voice was quiet but absolute. Just don't. She walked into their home, past the designer furniture and wedding photos that now felt like props in an elaborate lie. In their bedroom, she sat heavily on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to process what had happened. Tyler followed her upstairs, hovering in the doorway like a guilty child. The watch situation has an explanation. I sent it to be repaired and didn't want to worry you. Scarlett offering to handle it was just a favor. Madison looked at him with new eyes, seeing the practiced ease with which lies rolled off his tongue. A favor from a woman you've mentioned exactly twice in 2 years of marriage? She's not important, Madison. You're letting pregnancy hormones cloud your judgment. There it was again, the dismissal, the gaslighting, the implication that her intuition was somehow chemically compromised. Madison had heard this script before from other wives at charity luncheons, women who'd learned to doubt themselves until they couldn't distinguish between truth and manipulation. Show me your phone, she said quietly. Tyler's face went through a microsecond of panic before settling into wounded indignation. Are you serious? You want to check my phone like I'm some teenager? If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Then he pulled out his iPhone and handed it to her with exaggerated martyrdom. Fine, look through everything. You'll see how wrong you are. Madison scrolled through his text messages, finding nothing suspicious. His call log was similarly clean, but she noticed something that made her stomach clench. His social media apps were missing. Where's Instagram? She asked. I deleted it. Social media is toxic. You know that. Madison opened the App Store and checked his download history. Instagram had been deleted that very afternoon, just hours before the gala, along with Snapchat, WhatsApp, and several other communication apps. You deleted Instagram today, she said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Tyler's fabricated innocence crumbled slightly. I've been meaning to do a digital detox. Tonight seemed like a good time to start. Madison handed him back his phone and walked to her laptop. She opened Instagram and searched for Scarlett Valentine's profile. What she found made her blood run cold. Scarlett's feed was a carefully curated attack on Madison's life. There were photos from restaurants where Madison had celebrated anniversaries with Tyler, but posted just days later with captions like, "Amazing night with my favorite person." Pictures from the Sterling Industries headquarters, with flirty captions about private meetings with the boss. Most damning of all was a photo from that very morning, showing Scarlett wearing a bracelet Madison recognized. Tyler had given it to her for their first anniversary, claiming it was a family heirloom. Tyler, Madison called, her voice unnaturally calm. Come look at this. He approached reluctantly, and she watched his face drain of color as he saw his lies laid out in high-definition detail. Madison, I can explain all of this. No. She closed the laptop with quiet finality. You can't, because there is no explanation that doesn't involve you lying to me for months while carrying on an affair with a woman who's been publicly humiliating me to 2.3 million followers. Tyler ran his hands through his hair, the polished facade finally cracking completely. It's not what it looks like. Yes, I've been seeing her, but it's not serious. It's just physical. You've been so focused on the pregnancy, so tired all the time. You needed what? Madison stood, her voice rising for the first time. You needed to betray your pregnant wife because I was too busy growing your child to service you properly? That's not what I meant. Get out. Madison, please. Get out of this room, now. Tyler hesitated, perhaps recognizing that pushing further would be catastrophic. We'll talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. After he left, Madison sank back onto the bed and opened her laptop again. She created a private Instagram account and began systematically screenshotting Scarlett's posts. If this was war, she needed evidence. What she discovered over the next 2 hours was worse than simple infidelity. Scarlett hadn't just stolen Madison's husband. She'd been methodically stealing her life. The jewelry, the restaurants, even the pet names Tyler used. It was as if Scarlett had been studying Madison's marriage and systematically replacing her. But the cruelest touch was the timing. Every romantic post was dated just days after Madison had experienced those same moments with Tyler. Their anniversary dinner, his surprise weekend in Napa, even their baby announcement. Scarlett had recreated each milestone, making Madison's most precious memories feel like dress rehearsals for the real thing. As dawn broke over Dallas, Madison sat surrounded by printed screenshots and the ruins of her fairy tale marriage. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Gone to the office early. We'll work this out. I love you. Madison deleted the message without responding. Love wasn't a word that meant anything coming from him anymore. Instead, she called the one person who might have answers. Robert, it's Madison. I need to talk to you. Robert Sterling's voice was unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting her call. I assumed you would. Come to my office at 10. And Madison, bring those screenshots. We have a lot to discuss. Madison hung up, realizing that whatever game was being played, it was bigger than her marriage and more dangerous than simple infidelity. She was about to discover just how expendable Tyler Sterling considered her to be. Sterling Industries occupied 43 floors of gleaming steel and glass in downtown Dallas, a monument to Robert Sterling's transformation from a roughneck oil worker to a billionaire energy mogul. Madison had been here dozens of times for company events, but never as a betrayed wife seeking answers from the man who'd built an empire on calculated risks. Robert's corner office was a study in controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city, while the walls displayed photographs of handshake deals worth billions and politicians who owed their careers to sterling money. Behind his massive desk sat the man himself, reading a thick manila folder with the intensity of a general reviewing battle plans. "Sit," Robert commanded without looking up. "Tell me what you discovered last night." Madison placed her printed screenshots on his desk, watching his expression as he flipped through them. His face revealed nothing, but she caught the slight tightening around his eyes when he saw the bracelet photos. "This has been going on for at least 6 months, Madison said. "Maybe longer. She's been documenting every private moment of our marriage and recreating it publicly." Robert set down the papers and fixed her with those penetrating gray eyes. "What do you think this is about, Madison?" "An affair. Tyler got bored with pregnant me and found someone more exciting." "No." Robert's voice cut through her assumption like a blade. "This is about you specifically. Look at the pattern. She's not just stealing your husband. She's stealing your identity." Madison frowned. "I don't understand." Robert swiveled his computer monitor toward her. On the screen was a detailed background report on Scarlett Valentine. Real name is Scarlett Vance, from a trailer park in Louisiana. Dropped out of high school at 16, worked as a stripper in New Orleans until she discovered Instagram. She's not some socialite having an affair for fun. She's a professional. Professional what? Homewrecker. Robert's smile held no warmth. She targets wealthy men in stable marriages. The pattern is always the same. Seduce the husband, document the relationship publicly to humiliate the wife, then disappear with a settlement when the divorce gets ugly. Madison felt sick. "How many wives?" "4 that we can confirm. All ended up divorced, financially ruined, and psychologically destroyed. The husbands always come out looking like victims who were seduced by a temptress." "But why me? Tyler and I have been happy." Robert's expression softened slightly. "Madison, you're carrying the Sterling heir. When that child is born, he'll inherit 40% of Sterling Industries, regardless of what happens to your marriage. If you're discredited, declared unfit, or driven away, Tyler gains control of those shares." The implications hit Madison like a physical blow. "Tyler planned this?" "Tyler is an idiot who thinks with his ego and other body parts, but someone else is pulling the strings." Robert opened another file. 3 weeks before Scarlett first contacted Tyler, someone paid her $500,000 through a shell company. "We're still tracing the money, but I have suspicions." Madison's phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. She glanced at it and felt her blood freeze. Scarlett had posted a new photo 20 minutes ago. She was in Madison's favorite boutique, the one where Madison shopped for maternity clothes, trying on a wedding dress. The caption read, "Some dreams are worth waiting for. Sometimes the best things come to those who know how to take them." "She's escalating," Madison whispered, showing Robert the post. Robert studied the image with cold calculation. "Good. Escalation means mistakes, and mistakes mean evidence." "What are we going to do?" "We are going to give Miss Vance exactly what she wants. A public confrontation that destroys your reputation completely." Robert's smile was predatory. "And then we are going to destroy her." Madison stared at him. "You want me to let her humiliate me publicly? I want you to let her think she's winning while we build an airtight case against whoever is paying her. Trust me, Madison. By the time we're finished, she'll wish she'd never heard the Sterling name." Before Madison could respond, Tyler burst through the office door without knocking, his face flushed with panic and anger. "Father, what is Madison doing here? And why are there private investigators' reports on my desk about Scarlett?" Robert didn't look up from the files. "Cleaning up your mess, son, as usual." Tyler turned to Madison, his expression desperate. "Madison, whatever he's told you, it's not true. Scarlett and I are over. It was a mistake." "When did it end?" Madison asked quietly. "Last night, after the gala. I told her we couldn't see each other anymore." Madison held up her phone, showing Scarlett's wedding dress post from 20 minutes ago. "She doesn't seem to have gotten that message." Tyler stared at the image, his face going white. "I don't understand. She was crying when I left her. She said she understood." Robert finally looked up, his expression mixing disgust and disappointment. Son, you've been played by a professional. Miss Vance has been documenting every private conversation, every intimate moment, every piece of sensitive information you've shared. You've handed our family's enemies a nuclear weapon. What enemies? Tyler stammered. The kind who pay $500,000 to destroy marriages and steal companies. Robert stood, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the office. The kind who know that a discredited wife means a pliable heir. Madison watched Tyler process this information, seeing the exact moment he realized how thoroughly he'd been manipulated. The guilt and panic in his eyes transformed into something harder and more dangerous. What do you want me to do? Tyler asked. Robert smiled coldly. Nothing. You've done enough damage. Madison and I will handle this from here. Madison is my wife. This is my marriage. Your marriage ended the moment you chose Instagram attention over family loyalty. Robert's voice carried the authority of a man who'd built empires on decisive action. Now get out of my office and stay away from both Scarlett and Madison until this is resolved. After Tyler left, Robert turned back to Madison. Are you prepared to see this through? It's going to get uglier before it gets better. Madison placed her hand on her swollen belly, thinking about the child growing inside her and the legacy he deserved. What do you need me to do? Be exactly who you've always been. Dignified, classy, and unbreakable. Let Scarlett make her moves while we gather evidence. And Madison? Robert's smile was sharp as steel. When the time comes to strike back, don't hesitate. In this family, we finish what others start. As Madison left Sterling Industries that morning, she didn't notice the black sedan that had been following her since she left home. Inside, Jackson Wright reviewed the surveillance photos his team had captured and smiled with satisfaction. Phase 2 was about to begin. Madison's baby shower was supposed to be a celebration of new life and female friendship, held in the sun-drenched conservatory of the Dallas Country Club. Her mother had flown in from East Texas, along with college friends who'd driven from Houston and Austin. The guest list was carefully curated, 24 women who genuinely cared about Madison rather than her husband's bank account. Helena Cross had insisted on planning the entire event, dismissing Madison's protests that she didn't want anything too elaborate. Helena had been Madison's closest friend since college, the maid of honor at her wedding, and the one person who'd seamlessly transitioned from Madison's old life to her new one. As Tyler's business partner in several tech ventures, Helena moved effortlessly between both worlds. You deserve to be celebrated, Helena had said while arranging for the custom pink and blue decorations. After everything you've sacrificed for Tyler's career, this is your moment to shine. Madison had been grateful for Helena's support, especially during the past weeks as her marriage crumbled in slow motion. Tyler had moved to the guest bedroom, claiming he needed space to think, while Madison dealt with increasingly aggressive social media attacks from Scarlett's followers. The shower was picture perfect. Pastel flowers cascaded from crystal vases, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Madison wore a flowing white dress that accentuated her pregnancy glow, accepting gifts and well wishes with genuine warmth. For 2 hours, she almost forgot about Scarlett Valentine and the war being waged for her family's future. Then the doors opened and Scarlett walked in. She wore a form-fitting pink dress that screamed expensive taste and Instagram readiness, carrying a massive silver gift bag that immediately drew every eye in the room. The conversations didn't stop immediately, but Madison felt the subtle shift as her guests processed this unexpected arrival. Madison, Scarlett called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. I hope you don't mind me crashing your beautiful party. I brought something special for the baby. Madison's mother, Betty Hayes, moved protectively closer to her daughter. At 55, Betty still carried herself with the no-nonsense authority of a woman who'd raised 3 children on a teacher's salary. She'd never been impressed by sterling money, and she was even less impressed by social media influencers. I'm sorry, Betty said firmly, but this is a private event. I don't believe you were invited. Scarlett's smile never wavered as she pulled out her phone and began live streaming. Hey, beautiful people. Scarlett here at Madison Sterling's baby shower, about to surprise the mom-to-be with something very special. Madison felt the familiar knot of dread forming in her stomach. Around the room, several guests were discreetly recording with their own phones. Whatever was about to happen would be documented from multiple angles. Scarlett, Madison said carefully, this really isn't the time or place. Oh, but it's the perfect time, Scarlett interrupted, her voice bright with manufactured excitement. She reached into the gift bag and pulled out an ornate wooden box. Tyler asked me to bring this personally. He wanted to make sure you got it today. Helena stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. I can take that to Madison later. Perhaps you should— No, it has to be now, Scarlett insisted, pressing the box into Madison's reluctant hands. Tyler was very specific. Open it in front of everyone. Madison's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a stunning diamond tennis bracelet, the kind of jewelry that cost more than most people's cars and came with its own insurance policy. It's beautiful, Madison said quietly, though something felt wrong about the gesture. Read the card, Scarlett urged, her phone still recording every moment. With growing trepidation, Madison opened the small envelope tucked beside the bracelet. The handwriting was Tyler's, but the words made her blood run cold. For the mother of my child and the woman who owns my heart, thank you for giving me the greatest gift of all. All my love, Tyler. The room fell absolutely silent. Madison stared at the card, processing what she was seeing. Tyler's handwriting, but referring to my child as if there was only one. And the phrasing was wrong, too intimate and romantic for a gift from a guilty husband trying to make amends. There's more, Scarlett said sweetly, producing a second card from her purse. He wanted me to share this with everyone too. The second card was also in Tyler's handwriting, but this one was addressed to Scarlett. Thank you for understanding why I have to play the devoted husband until after the baby comes. Soon we can be a real family, the three of us. Madison's world tilted sideways. The three of us. That could only mean one thing. I wanted everyone to know, Scarlett announced to her livestream audience, one hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach, that Tyler and I are expecting too. Our baby is due in March, just 3 months after Madison's. Tyler is going to be such a busy daddy. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Several guests gasped audibly while others reached for their phones to capture Madison's response. Betty Hayes moved to put her arm around her daughter, but Madison stood frozen, unable to process the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in her carefully controlled life. That's impossible, Madison whispered. Is it? Scarlett tilted her head with mock sympathy. Tyler's been so attentive these past few months. So many private dinners, weekend trips, late-night conversations about our future together. He said marriage to you was just business, securing his inheritance. But what we have is real love. Helena stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. This is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately. But Scarlett wasn't finished. She pulled a pregnancy test from her purse, the positive result clearly visible to her phone camera and the horrified guests. Took this yesterday. Tyler cried when I told him. Happy tears, of course. He said he's never felt joy like this before. Madison felt the room spinning around her. The stress, the shock, the public humiliation was too much. She gripped the back of a chair, fighting a wave of dizziness as her vision blurred at the edges. Madison? Her mother's voice sounded far away. Honey, are you okay? Madison tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The last thing she remembered was the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as she collapsed, Scarlett's triumphant smile burning itself into her memory as darkness closed in. She woke up in the hospital 3 hours later, hooked to monitors that tracked both her heartbeat and her baby's. Tyler sat beside her bed, his face a mask of guilt and panic. The baby's fine, he said immediately. You fainted from stress, but there's no lasting damage. Madison turned away from him, staring at the white hospital wall. Is it true? Is what true? Is Scarlett pregnant with your child? The silence stretched long enough to answer her question. When Tyler finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. She says she is. But Madison, even if she is, it doesn't change anything between us. You're my wife. You're having my son. That's what matters. Madison closed her eyes, feeling the last pieces of her old life crumbling away. Get out. Madison, get out of my room. Get out of my life. I can't look at you anymore. After Tyler left, Madison lay in the hospital bed and felt her baby kick strongly against her ribs. At least one thing in her world was still pure and untouched by betrayal. She didn't notice the nurse who lingered a bit too long outside her door, or the way that same nurse immediately pulled out her phone to send a text message the moment she was out of sight. The message was simple. Phase 2 complete. She's broken. Proceed to Phase 3. Jackson Wright read the message with satisfaction and opened his laptop to initiate the final phase of the operation. By tomorrow morning, Madison Sterling would discover that betrayal ran much deeper than an unfaithful husband. Some wounds were designed to never heal. Madison spent 3 days in the hospital under observation. 3 days of blessed quiet where she could process the wreckage of her life without cameras or confrontations. Tyler had tried to visit twice more, but she'd instructed the nurses to turn him away. She wasn't ready to face him, wasn't ready for his explanations or apologies or desperate attempts to salvage what couldn't be saved. On the third morning, Robert Sterling arrived with coffee and a grim expression. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the visitor's chair with surprising gentleness for such a formidable man. "Like my entire life was a lie," Madison replied honestly. "But the baby's healthy, so I'm focusing on that." "Good. That's what matters most." Robert opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I have news about Miss Vance's pregnancy claim." Madison's heart clenched. "She's really pregnant?" "She's carrying a child, yes, but not Tyler's." Robert's smile was coldly satisfied. "According to her medical records, which cost me a considerable sum to obtain, she's 14 weeks along. Tyler swears their affair only started 8 weeks ago." "Tyler lies about everything. In this case, he's telling the truth. We have hotel security footage, restaurant receipts, phone records. Their first contact was exactly 8 weeks ago." Robert placed a photograph on the bedside table. "This is the real father." Madison stared at the image of a middle-aged man with sharp features and calculating eyes. "Who is he?" "Jackson Wright, CEO of Wright Technologies, one of our biggest competitors in the renewable energy sector. He's been trying to buy Sterling Industries for 3 years, and I've refused every offer." The pieces clicked together in Madison's mind with sickening clarity. This was never about Tyler's midlife crisis. It was a corporate takeover. Exactly. Wright paid Scarlett to seduce Tyler and document everything for maximum humiliation. The goal was to destabilize our family, crater our stock price, and force me to sell to prevent further scandal. Robert's eyes glinted with predatory satisfaction. "Unfortunately for Mr. Wright, he underestimated both my resources and my daughter-in-law's strength." Madison felt something stirring inside her that hadn't been there since the baby shower. Not hope exactly, but something harder and more useful. Anger. "What's our next move?" "Our next move is to let them think they've won while we build an airtight case for corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. But first, I need Tyler to play his part." As if summoned by his father's words, Tyler appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard, his usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. "Madison," he began, but Robert held up a silencing hand. "Tyler, sit down and listen. I'm going to explain exactly how you're going to fix the mess you've created." Over the next hour, Robert laid out a plan that was both elegant and ruthless. Tyler would publicly end his relationship with Scarlett, claiming he'd been manipulated and used. He'd beg Madison's forgiveness in a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to make him look like a remorseful husband fighting for his family. "The key," Robert explained, "is to make Wright think his plan worked too well. If Tyler appears completely broken and desperate, Wright will assume he has us exactly where he wants us. He'll make his buyout offer, and when he does, we'll have him for corporate espionage." Madison listened to the plan with growing unease. "You're asking me to pretend everything is fine? To take Tyler back publicly?" "I'm asking you to help me save our family's legacy," Robert replied. "Your son will inherit 40% of Sterling Industries. Would you rather he inherit a thriving company or the remnants of what Wright leaves behind?" Tyler leaned forward desperately. "Madison, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but if there's any chance you could consider couples therapy, a fresh start—" "There is no fresh start, Tyler." Madison's voice was steady and final. "Our marriage is over, But I'll play the part your father needs me to play because my son's future matters more than my pride. Tyler flinched as if she'd slapped him, but Robert nodded approvingly. Good. Tyler, you have work to do. First, you're going to publicly dump Scarlett Valentine in the most humiliating way possible. Make it clear she was using you and you were too blind to see it. Then you're going to spend the next few weeks being the perfect repentant husband. What about the pregnancy? Tyler asked quietly. What pregnancy? Robert's smile was razor sharp. Miss Vance is carrying Jackson Wright's child, not yours. When that becomes public knowledge, it will complete her humiliation and destroy Wright's credibility. Madison was discharged from the hospital that afternoon, and Tyler drove her home in pointed silence. The house felt different now, tainted by betrayal and broken promises. But as she settled into the living room with her laptop, she felt a familiar determination taking root. She spent the evening documenting everything. Screenshots of Scarlett's Instagram posts, copies of text messages, medical records from her hospital stay. If they were going to war, she wanted her own ammunition. The next morning brought the first sign that Robert's plan was working. Tyler's Instagram post breaking up with Scarlett was brutal in its efficiency. I was manipulated by someone I thought cared about me, but who was actually using me for money and social media content. I'm ashamed of my behavior and the pain I've caused my wife and family. Scarlett Vance is no longer part of my life in any capacity. Within hours, the post had 50,000 likes and 10,000 comments, mostly from women praising Tyler for seeing through the gold digger and choosing his family. Scarlett's response was swift and vicious. She went live on Instagram, tears streaming down her face as she claimed Tyler had abandoned her and their unborn child. The victim narrative was perfectly crafted, complete with screenshots of loving text messages and photos of expensive gifts. But Madison noticed something in Scarlett's performance that made her pause. Behind the tears and dramatic gestures, there was something calculating in her eyes, as if she was following a script rather than reacting emotionally. That evening, Helena Cross called with what sounded like genuine concern. Madison, I saw Tyler's post. Are you okay? This whole situation is so messy. I'm surviving, Madison replied carefully. Something about Helena's tone felt off, too practiced. Tyler called me crying, Helena continued. He's absolutely devastated. He knows he made a mistake, but he's terrified he's lost you forever. Maybe you could consider couples therapy? For the baby's sake? Madison frowned. Tyler crying to Helena was odd. They were business partners, not close friends, and Tyler had never been one to show vulnerability to anyone outside family. I'll think about it, Madison said noncommittally. After hanging up, Madison stared at her phone with growing unease. Helena's call felt rehearsed, as if she'd been coached on what to say. For the first time since this nightmare began, Madison wondered if the conspiracy might run deeper than even Robert suspected. She was about to discover just how right she was. Madison's temporary sense of security lasted exactly 72 hours. Just long enough for her to believe that Robert's plan might actually work, that they could outmaneuver Jackson Wright in Scarlett's manipulation. She should have known that powerful men didn't build empires by giving up after one setback. The first crack in her restored confidence came through a text message from an unknown number. Check your email. Someone who cares. The email contained a single attachment, a video file that made Madison's blood run cold as she watched it play out on her laptop screen. It was security footage from Tyler's downtown apartment, the one he'd supposedly given up after their marriage. The timestamp showed it was from the previous week, 2 days before their hospital plan went into effect. In grainy black and white, she watched Tyler let himself into the apartment. 20 minutes later, Scarlett arrived. But it wasn't their meeting that destroyed Madison's fragile hope. It was what happened 3 hours later. Helena Cross walked out of that same apartment, looking satisfied and checking her phone as she disappeared from the camera's view. Madison stared at the screen, her mind struggling to process this new betrayal. Helena, her best friend since college. Helena, who'd held her hand during the engagement. Helena, who'd planned her baby shower and called to check on her recovery. Helena, who was apparently working with Scarlett and Tyler all along. Madison's phone rang. The caller ID showed Robert Sterling. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Wright just made his move. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, claiming he has evidence of financial irregularities that require immediate intervention. What kind of evidence? The kind that could destroy Sterling Industries if it becomes public. Someone has been feeding him internal documents, Madison. Someone with access to our most sensitive files. Madison closed her laptop. The security footage still burned into her memory. Robert, I think I know who your leak is. She told him about the video, about Helena's presence at Tyler's secret apartment, about the phone call that had felt scripted and wrong. Robert listened in grim silence. Helena Cross, he said finally, Tyler's business partner. She has access to everything through their joint ventures. How long do you think she's been working against us? Based on the timing of Wright's moves? Probably since before you were married. This wasn't opportunistic betrayal, Madison. This was a long-term strategy. Madison felt the last pillars of her old life crumbling away. First Tyler, then Scarlett, now Helena. Everyone she'd trusted had been systematically working to destroy her. What do we do now? Now we get angry, Robert said, steel creeping into his voice. And we remind these people why you don't declare war on a Sterling. The emergency board meeting was held in Sterling Industries' main conference room, 43 floors above downtown Dallas. Madison arrived with Robert, dressed in a black power suit that accentuated her pregnancy while projecting strength. She learned enough about corporate warfare to know that perception was everything. Jackson Wright was already there, looking every inch the successful tech mogul in his perfectly tailored suit and confident smile. He was younger than Robert, maybe 50, with a kind of aggressive charm that probably played well in Silicon Valley boardrooms. Robert, Wright said, standing to shake hands with false collegiality, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know the timing is unfortunate given your family's recent struggles. Let's skip the pleasantries, Jackson. What's this about? Wright smiled and nodded to his assistant, who distributed thick folders to every person in the room. It's about Sterling Industries' systematic fraud over the past 5 years. Inflated earnings reports, hidden debt, bribes to government officials for energy contracts. Madison opened the folder and felt her heart sink. The documents looked authentic, complete with Robert's signature on several compromising agreements. If these were real, they were looking at criminal charges and the complete destruction of the company. These documents are fabricated, Robert said calmly, though Madison caught the tension in his jaw. Are they? Wright produced a tablet and set it on the conference table. Then perhaps you can explain this recorded conversation between you and Senator Williams about the Texas renewable energy contracts. He pressed play, and Robert's voice filled the room, clearly discussing payments that sounded suspiciously like bribes. The conversation was damning, impossible to explain away as anything legitimate. This is why I'm making a generous offer to acquire Sterling Industries, Wright continued smoothly, to save your employees and shareholders from the fallout when these documents become public. I'm prepared to offer $12 billion for full acquisition, which is more than generous given the circumstances. Madison watched the board members' faces, seeing doubt and fear creep into their expressions. Wright's trap was elegant and complete. Accept his buyout offer or face criminal prosecution and financial ruin. I need time to consider your offer, Robert said carefully. Of course, but I should mention that these documents are scheduled to be released to the Securities and Exchange Commission and major news outlets tomorrow at noon, unless we reach an agreement. Wright's smile was predatory. I'd hate for this to become a public spectacle, especially with everything your family has been through lately. After Wright left, Robert sat in silence for several minutes while the board members filed out, whispering anxiously among themselves. How bad is it? Madison asked. Catastrophic if those documents are real. Wright has been building this case for years, using Helena and Tyler to gather the evidence he needed. Robert's expression was grim. Even if we prove the recordings are fabricated, the damage to our reputation will be irreversible. Madison felt a familiar stirring in her chest, the same anger that had sustained her through the baby shower humiliation, the same determination that had helped her survive Tyler's betrayal. There has to be something we can do. Actually, Robert said slowly, there might be, but it would require you to do something that could be very dangerous. What? Robert pulled out his phone and showed her a text message. Helena just invited you to lunch tomorrow. Says she's worried about you and wants to help you through this difficult time. Madison read the message with growing understanding. You think she's going to try to convince me to support Wright's takeover? I think she's going to try to finish the job she started. And when she does, we're going to be ready for her. Robert's plan was risky and required perfect timing. Madison would wear a wire to the lunch meeting, letting Helena incriminate herself while secretly recording everything. Meanwhile, Robert's security team would be tracking Helena's communications and gathering evidence of the conspiracy. Are you sure about this? Robert asked. If Wright's suspects were onto him, there's no telling how he might respond. Madison thought about her unborn son, about the legacy she wanted him to inherit, a legacy built on integrity rather than the ashes of betrayal. I'm sure, she said firmly. Helena wants to meet the broken, defeated Madison. Let's give her exactly what she's expecting. What Madison didn't know was that Jackson Wright was already 3 moves ahead. As she and Robert planned their counterattack, Wright was putting the finishing touches on a strategy that would destroy not just Madison's reputation, but her very identity. The lunch meeting was a trap, but not the kind they were expecting. Some games are won before the first move is ever played. The restaurant Helena chose for their lunch was Nobu Dallas, an upscale establishment where privacy came with white tablecloths and a wine list that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Madison arrived 15 minutes early. The recording device Robert's security team had given her tucked discreetly inside her purse. She'd practiced activating it until the motion became automatic. Helena was already there, looking perfectly put together in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Madison's monthly mortgage payment back when she was a teacher. Her smile was warm and concerned, the expression of a devoted friend worried about someone she loved. Madison, Helena stood to embrace her. You look wonderful. Pregnancy really does suit you. Thank you for suggesting this, Madison replied, settling into her chair and discreetly activating the recording device. I've been feeling so isolated lately. Helena's expression became appropriately sympathetic. I can only imagine. Tyler told me about the board meeting this morning. This whole Wright situation must be terrifying for you. Madison forced herself to look vulnerable and defeated. I don't understand any of it, Helena. Robert keeps talking about corporate espionage and fraud, but all I know is that everyone I trusted has been lying to me. Oh, honey, Helena reached across the table to squeeze Madison's hand. You can't think like that. Yes, Tyler made mistakes, but he loves you, and Robert is just trying to protect the family business. Is he? Or is he dragging us all down with him? Madison let doubt creep into her voice. Those documents Wright showed us looked pretty convincing. Helena's grip on her hand tightened almost imperceptibly. What exactly did Wright show you? Financial records, recorded conversations, signatures on contracts that looked like bribes. Madison watched Helena's face carefully. Robert says they're fabricated, but Helena, what if they're not? What if everything I thought I knew about this family is a lie? Madison, you have to be very careful here, Helena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I've been Tyler's business partner for 3 years. I've seen things, heard conversations that would shock you. What kind of things? Helena glanced around the restaurant nervously, as if checking for eavesdroppers. Robert Sterling isn't the man you think he is. Those contracts Wright has? I've seen the originals in Tyler's files. The bribes, the inflated reports, the offshore accounts. It's all real. Madison felt her heart pounding as Helena continued to incriminate herself, apparently believing she was converting a desperate daughter-in-law into an ally. But there's a way out, Helena continued urgently. Wright's buyout offer is legitimate. It's actually generous, considering what he knows. If you could convince Robert to accept it, you'd save yourself and your baby from the scandal that's coming. You really think Robert would listen to me? I think a pregnant daughter-in-law facing criminal charges might have more influence than you realize. Helena's smile turned calculating. Especially if you had specific information about Robert's financial crimes to share with prosecutors in exchange for immunity. There it was. Helena wasn't just asking Madison to betray Robert. She was asking her to manufacture evidence for a criminal prosecution. What kind of specific information? Madison asked carefully. Helena pulled out her phone and showed Madison several photographs of documents. Tyler has been keeping copies of everything. insurance in case Robert ever tried to blame him for the company's problems, bank transfer records, signed contracts with foreign officials, meeting notes about bribing state energy commissioners. Madison studied the photos, recognizing her father-in-law's handwriting on several of them. They looked authentic, damning, and completely fabricated. Helena, these could destroy Robert completely. That's the point, Helena said, her mask finally slipping completely. Robert Sterling has been a tyrant who's built his empire on corruption and intimidation. It's time someone stood up to him. Someone like Jackson Wright. Helena's smile was cold and satisfied. Wright is offering you a chance at a clean start, Madison. A generous settlement, full custody of your baby, and immunity from prosecution. All you have to do is testify that you saw Robert sign those contracts. Madison felt sick as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. They hadn't just been trying to steal Sterling Industries. They'd been trying to frame Robert for crimes that would send him to prison for the rest of his life. I need time to think about this, Madison said carefully. Of course, but don't take too long. Wright's deadline is tomorrow at noon, and after that, all bets are off. Helena signaled for the check. Madison, I know this is hard, but sometimes you have to choose between loyalty and survival. After Helena left, Madison sat in her car for several minutes, processing what she'd just witnessed. Her best friend since college had just asked her to commit perjury in a criminal case. The woman who'd been her maid of honor was working to destroy her family and send her father-in-law to prison. She drove straight to Sterling Industries, the recording device burning like a coal in her purse. Robert listened to the entire conversation in grim silence, his face growing darker with each revelation. We have her, he said finally. Conspiracy, fraud, attempted subornation of perjury. Wright's entire operation is finished. What happens now? Now we turn this over to the FBI and watch Wright's empire crumble. Robert's smile was coldly satisfied. By tomorrow morning, he'll be in federal custody. Madison felt a wave of relief so intense it was almost dizzying. It's really over? It's over. Wright, Helena, Scarlett, they're all finished. Your son will inherit a company with its reputation intact. That evening, Madison allowed herself to feel genuinely hopeful for the first time in months. She'd survived betrayal by her husband, her best friend, and a professional conspiracy designed to destroy her family. Tomorrow, justice would be served. She went to bed early, exhausted by the day's emotional toll, but optimistic about the future. She was finally safe. She woke up at 3 a.m. to her phone buzzing with dozens of notifications. Text messages, missed calls, Instagram alerts, all flooding in at once. With growing dread, she opened her phone to find that her entire world had once again been turned upside down. But this time, the attack wasn't coming from Wright or Scarlett or Helena. This time it was coming from everywhere at once. And unlike everything that had come before, this assault was designed not just to humiliate or manipulate her, but to completely erase her identity and destroy any possibility of recovery. The perfect storm was just beginning. Madison's phone screen was chaos incarnate. Hundreds of notifications, thousands of comments, her name trending on every social media platform with a mixture of laughing emojis and disgust reactions. With shaking hands, she opened Twitter to find the video that had destroyed her life while she slept. It was her face, her voice, her expressions, sitting in what appeared to be Tyler's downtown apartment. She was speaking directly to the camera with cruel satisfaction. I trapped Tyler Sterling with this pregnancy because I wanted his money, the digital version of herself said with a cold smile. Poor kid doesn't even know his real father is my ex-boyfriend from East Texas. Tyler was so easy to manipulate. Rich men are always the most gullible when a pretty girl pays attention to them. Madison watched in horror as her digital doppelganger continued. The miscarriage scare was fake too. Just some acting to get sympathy. Robert Sterling is a criminal, and I'm going to help prosecutors put him in prison so I can inherit everything. That baby will never know what a pathetic loser his fake daddy really is. The video was perfectly crafted, using advanced artificial intelligence to map Madison's facial expressions onto someone else's body, while replicating her voice with disturbing accuracy. To anyone who didn't know better, it looked completely authentic. The comment sections were vicious beyond anything Madison had ever experienced. Death threats, calls for child protective services to take her baby. suggestions that she should be imprisoned for fraud. Her phone number had somehow been leaked, and it rang constantly with harassment calls. She tried calling Robert, but his line went straight to voicemail. Tyler's phone was disconnected entirely. Even her mother's number was busy, probably overwhelmed with calls from reporters and angry strangers. Madison was completely, utterly alone. At 7 a.m., there was a knock at her door. Through the peephole, she saw two people in dark suits holding badges. Federal agents. "Mrs. Sterling, we're with the FBI. We need to speak with you about allegations of fraud and conspiracy." Madison's hands shook as she opened the door. The female agent was professional but cold, while her male partner looked at Madison with obvious disgust. "Ma'am, we're investigating claims that you and your father-in-law have been involved in a conspiracy to defraud investors and government officials," the female agent said. "We have a warrant to search these premises." "Based on what evidence?" The male agent held up his phone, showing the deepfake video. "Based on your confession, Mrs. Sterling. Would you like to explain why you're admitting to fraud and perjury in this recording?" Madison stared at the screen, realizing that Wright's final gambit was more devastating than anything she'd imagined. The deepfake wasn't just character assassination, it was manufactured evidence in a federal criminal case. "That video is fake," she said desperately. "It's artificial intelligence." "I never said any of those things." The agents exchanged skeptical glances. "Ma'am, we've had our technical team examine this footage. Our preliminary analysis suggests it's authentic." Over the next 4 hours, Madison watched federal agents tear through her home while reporters gathered outside like vultures. They seized her computer, her phone, her financial records, even her medical files from the pregnancy. Every private moment of her life became evidence in a case that could send her to prison for decades. The agents found exactly what they were looking for because Wright had planted it there. Bank statements showing suspicious deposits, emails apparently to Helena about fabricating evidence against Robert, and a handwritten note in Madison's own writing outlining the conspiracy. Madison recognized the handwriting because it was hers, lifted from old shopping lists and thank you cards, then digitally reconstructed into a document that appeared to prove her guilt. "Mrs. Sterling," the female agent said as they prepared to leave, "you're not under arrest at this time, but we strongly recommend you retain legal counsel. These are serious federal charges." After they left, Madison sat in her devastated home and felt the full weight of Wright's strategy crush down on her. He hadn't just attacked her reputation. He'd built an airtight criminal case using technology that most people didn't even know existed. The deepfake video had been viewed 12 million times. Her face was on the cover of every tabloid magazine, with headlines like, "Pregnant Gold Digger Exposed," and "The Sterling Conspiracy." Cable news channels were running hour-long specials about corporate fraud and trophy wives who would do anything for money. But the cruelest touch was personal. Her email inbox contained a message from her own mother. "Madison, I don't know what to believe anymore. The FBI called me asking about your childhood, about whether you ever showed signs of being manipulative or dishonest. I told them you were always a good girl, but that video, I need time to process this. Please don't call me until I'm ready to talk." Her mother, the one person who should have believed her unconditionally, had been turned against her by a few minutes of fabricated footage. Madison was now facing federal charges, public humiliation on a global scale, and the complete destruction of every relationship that had ever mattered to her. Wright had successfully isolated her from any potential support system while building a criminal case that seemed impossible to defend against. As she sat alone in her violated home, Madison felt something she hadn't experienced since this nightmare began: complete and utter defeat. For the first time, she genuinely wondered if Wright had won. The baby kicked strongly against her ribs, reminding her that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. But for the first time in her life, Madison Sterling didn't know how to fight back. She was about to discover that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected source, and sometimes the best revenge is simply survival. Robert Sterling had built his empire by understanding one fundamental truth. In war, the side that controls information controls the outcome. While federal agents ransacked Madison's home and the world consumed manufactured lies about his family, he sat in his private office executing a plan 3 decades in the making. Jackson Wright had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed that Robert's power came from Sterling Industries, that attacking the company would cripple the man. But Robert's real strength had never been in quarterly earnings or stock prices. It had been in the network of relationships, debts, and secrets he'd accumulated during 30 years of building an energy empire. The secure phone on his desk rang exactly at noon. "Senator Williams," Robert said without pleasantries, "I assume you've seen the news about my alleged corruption." "Robert, I'm sorry, but given the federal investigation, I can't be seen talking to you right now. My political career will end in approximately 6 hours when I release the real recordings of our conversations," Robert interrupted calmly. "The ones where you explicitly state that the energy contracts were awarded based on merit, not bribes, along with bank records showing that every payment Wright claims was a bribe, was actually a legitimate consulting fee paid through your law firm." Silence on the line. "Of course," Robert continued, "those recordings could remain private if you were to make a statement to the FBI about the fabricated nature of Wright's evidence. Your choice, Senator." By 2 p.m., Robert had made similar calls to 12 government officials, 6 business partners, and 3 federal judges who owed him favors dating back to the previous decade. The network Wright thought he'd destroyed began to reassemble itself with ruthless efficiency. Meanwhile, David Barlow, Robert's head of security, was executing his own strategy in the digital realm. The deepfake video that had destroyed Madison's reputation was sophisticated, but not perfect. Under expert analysis, the kind that required specialized software and unlimited resources, the artificial intelligence artifacts were detectable. "Wright made one mistake," David reported to Robert via encrypted communication. "He used the same deepfake technology that his company developed for their virtual reality division. The digital signature is embedded in the metadata. We can prove he created it. How long to build an airtight case? 6 hours for technical evidence, 12 hours for legal documentation that will hold up in federal court. Do it. And David, while you're building that case, I want you to dig into Wright's personal life. Men who build empires on lies usually have interesting secrets." At 4 p.m., Robert received an unexpected visitor. Madison arrived at his office looking hollow and desperate, her usual composure replaced by the shell-shocked expression of someone who'd lost everything. "They're going to arrest me," she said without preamble. "The FBI, the federal prosecutors, everyone believes that video is real." "Sit down," Robert commanded gently, pouring her a glass of water. "Tell me exactly what they said." Madison described the search warrant, the planted evidence, the agent's certainty that she was guilty of conspiracy and fraud. As she talked, Robert felt something he rarely experienced: genuine paternal protectiveness. This young woman had shown more strength and dignity than his own son, and Wright was systematically destroying her for the crime of marrying into the Sterling family. "Madison," Robert said when she finished, "I need you to understand something. Wright's attack on you isn't personal, it's strategic. He knows that if he can break you, if he can make you confess or plead guilty to avoid prison time, the entire case against Sterling Industries becomes unassailable." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you're not just fighting for your reputation. You're fighting for the future of everyone Wright considers an enemy." Robert's expression was steel hard. "He's betting that a pregnant woman facing decades in prison will break under pressure. Maybe I should. Maybe I should just confess to crimes I didn't commit if it means my baby won't be born in prison." Robert studied her for a long moment, seeing something that Wright had missed entirely. Madison Sterling wasn't just Tyler's wife or the mother of Robert's grandchild. She was a survivor who'd been systematically underestimated by everyone who thought they could manipulate her. "There's another option," Robert said carefully, "but it requires you to trust me completely and do something that will be the hardest thing you've ever done." "What?" "Fight back, publicly, aggressively, and without mercy." Robert opened his laptop and showed her a prepared press release. "In 1 hour, we're holding a press conference where you're going to tell the world exactly what Wright has done to our family. The real story, with evidence to back it up." Madison read the statement, her eyes widening. "This will destroy Wright completely." "That's the point. He declared war on the Sterling family. Now he gets to see how we fight wars." The press conference was held in the main lobby of Sterling Industries, with every major news outlet in Texas represented. Madison stood at the podium wearing a navy blue dress that emphasized her pregnancy while projecting strength and authority. Behind her, massive screens displayed technical analysis of the deepfake video, bank records proving Wright's payments to Scarlett and Helena, and recorded conversations that revealed the entire conspiracy. "My name is Madison Sterling," she began, her voice steady and clear. "For the past 6 months, I have been the target of a sophisticated corporate espionage operation designed to destroy my family and steal Sterling Industries. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly how Jackson Wright used artificial intelligence, bribery, and fraud to manufacture evidence against innocent people." For 20 minutes, Madison methodically destroyed Wright's credibility while presenting irrefutable evidence of his crimes. She played Helena's recorded confession, showed technical proof that the deepfake video was fabricated, and revealed the financial trail connecting Wright to every aspect of the conspiracy. The final blow came when Robert stepped forward with a document that made every reporter in the room gasp. This morning, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed criminal charges against Jackson Wright for securities fraud, conspiracy, and corporate espionage. Federal agents are currently executing search warrants at Wright Technologies and several associated properties. As if summoned by his words, news vans were visible through the lobby windows, speeding toward Wright's headquarters across the city. Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the intoxicating rush of victory. Wright's empire was crumbling in real time, and she'd been the one to light the fuse. But the sweetest moment came that evening when her phone rang with a familiar number. "Madison?" Her mother's voice was tearful and apologetic. "Honey, I just watched your press conference. I am so sorry I doubted you. I should have known my daughter would never do those things." "It's okay, Mom," Madison replied, tears streaming down her face. "It's over now." But even as she said the words, Madison knew that the war's end would bring new challenges. She'd survived Wright's attack, but the cost had been enormous. Her marriage was irrevocably broken, her trust in people forever changed, and her son would be born into a world where his mother was famous for surviving a conspiracy rather than any achievement of her own. Still, as she sat in Robert's office that night, watching news reports about Wright's arrest and Wright Technologies' stock price collapsing, Madison felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. She'd been tested in ways she'd never imagined, and she'd emerged stronger than anyone, including herself, had believed possible. The Sterling legacy would survive, and so would she. 6 months later, Madison Sterling stood in the executive boardroom of Sterling Industries, her 3-month-old son sleeping peacefully in her arms as she reviewed the quarterly reports. The numbers were impressive: stock price up 40%, 3 major government contracts secured, and Wright Technologies successfully acquired in a hostile takeover that had made financial headlines worldwide. Jackson Wright was serving a 15-year sentence in federal prison for corporate espionage and fraud. Helena Cross had pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and received 5 years, her law license permanently revoked. Scarlett Valentine had disappeared entirely, her social media accounts deleted and her real identity lost in witness protection after agreeing to testify against her former handlers. And Tyler? Tyler was learning to live as a middle manager at a Sterling Industries facility in Oklahoma, his inheritance stripped away and his marriage dissolved in a divorce that had taken exactly 30 minutes to finalize. "Impressive work on the renewable energy division," Robert said, reviewing the same reports from his seat at the head of the table. "Profit margins up 22% in the first quarter alone." "Thank you," Madison replied, adjusting little Arthur James Sterling in her arms. "I think expanding into solar technology was the right move." The boardroom door opened, and David Barlow entered with a satisfied expression. "The final Wright Technologies assets have been integrated. We now own their artificial intelligence division, their virtual reality patents, and most importantly, their deepfake detection technology." Madison smiled coldly. "How poetic! Wright's own weapons turned against him." "Justice has a sense of humor," Robert agreed. He studied his daughter-in-law for a moment, noting how seamlessly she'd transitioned from betrayed wife to corporate executive. "Madison, there's something we need to discuss." "What's that?" "Succession planning. When I step down as CEO next year, the board will need to choose my replacement." Madison looked up from the baby, her expression carefully neutral. "Tyler's hardly qualified at this point." I wasn't thinking of Tyler. Robert's smile was genuinely warm, something she'd rarely seen from him. I was thinking of the woman who survived a coordinated attack from multiple enemies, rebuilt our company's reputation, and turned our greatest liability into our most profitable division. The implications hit Madison slowly. Robert, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm not sure I'm ready for... You're ready, Robert interrupted. You've been ready since the day you chose to fight back instead of breaking under pressure. The board agrees. Madison looked down at her son, thinking about the legacy she wanted him to inherit. Not just wealth and power, but the knowledge that his mother had earned her place through strength and intelligence, rather than marriage or manipulation. What about Tyler's reaction? Tyler forfeited his claim to the Sterling legacy when he chose betrayal over loyalty. Besides, Robert's expression turned calculating. He's got bigger concerns now. Pois femme. As if summoned by their conversation, the conference room's television screens flickered to life with breaking news. Tyler Sterling's face filled the screen, looking haggard and defeated as he was led from his Oklahoma apartment in handcuffs. Former Sterling Industries heir Tyler Sterling was arrested this morning on charges of tax evasion and securities fraud, the reporter announced. Federal investigators discovered hidden offshore accounts containing money allegedly stolen from his family's company over a period of several years. Madison watched her ex-husband's perp walk with something approaching pity. Even after everything he'd done, seeing him destroyed completely felt hollow rather than satisfying. You planted that evidence, she said to Robert. I discovered evidence of crimes that were already committed, Robert corrected smoothly. Tyler's theft from company accounts has been going on for 3 years. I simply chose when to reveal it to authorities. Key. Baby Arthur made a soft cooing sound, drawing Madison's attention back to what truly mattered. Her son would grow up in a world where his mother commanded respect through competence, rather than suffering through victimhood. When does the transition begin? Madison asked. Immediately. The board vote is scheduled for next week, but it's a formality. You'll be the youngest CEO in Sterling Industries history and the first woman to run the company. Robert's pride was evident. Your son will inherit an empire built on merit rather than marriage. That evening, Madison sat in her new penthouse apartment overlooking downtown Dallas, feeding Arthur while reviewing strategic plans for Sterling Industries' expansion into international markets. The space was nothing like the suburban mansion she'd shared with Tyler. This was entirely hers, modern, efficient, and uncompromised by anyone else's taste or manipulation. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your promotion. You deserved everything you got. For a moment, Madison wondered if it was a threat from some unknown enemy. Then she recognized the writing style and realized it was from Scarlett, wherever witness protection had hidden her. Madison deleted the message without responding. Some chapters of her life were permanently closed. As she prepared Arthur for bed, Madison reflected on how completely her world had changed. A year ago, she'd been a naive wife who trusted everyone and suspected no one. Now she was the CEO of a billion-dollar company who trusted no one and suspected everyone. The transformation had been painful, but necessary. Her phone rang with a call from her mother, now a weekly tradition since their reconciliation. How's my grandson? Betty Hayes asked, her voice warm with grandmotherly affection. Perfect. Growing fast. I think he's going to be tall like his grandfather. Which grandfather? Tyler or Robert? Madison smiled, looking down at Arthur's serious gray eyes that already held a hint of Robert's calculating intelligence. Definitely Robert. After ending the call, Madison carried Arthur to the floor-to-ceiling windows and pointed out at the Dallas skyline. In the distance, she could see Sterling Industries' headquarters, 43 floors of glass and steel that would one day belong to the boy in her arms. This is your inheritance, Arthur, she whispered. Not just the money or the power, but the knowledge that your family doesn't break under pressure. We don't surrender to bullies or conspiracies or people who think they can manipulate us. The baby looked up at her with those serious gray eyes as if he understood the weight of the legacy being passed to him. Your grandfather Robert taught me that survival isn't enough, Madison continued. Sometimes you have to win so completely that no one ever dares to attack your family again. Outside the window, Dallas glittered like scattered diamonds, a city full of opportunities and challenges that would shape Arthur's future. Madison had survived betrayal, humiliation, and systematic destruction. She'd emerged not just intact, but stronger than anyone had believed possible. The sterling legacy would continue through her son, but it would be defined by her choices. And Madison Sterling had chosen to be unbreakable. As Arthur drifted off to sleep in her arms, Madison allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Wright had tried to bury her, not knowing she was a seed. Now she was CEO of the company he'd tried to steal, mother to the heir he'd tried to eliminate, an architect of the empire he'd tried to destroy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving your enemy's attacks. Sometimes the best revenge is succeeding so completely that your victory becomes their permanent humiliation. Madison Sterling had learned to play chess while everyone else was playing checkers. And in this game, she'd achieved checkmate. The mistress had humiliated the pregnant wife, but the billionaire father-in-law had stepped in to teach them all a lesson about underestimating the quiet strength of a woman who refuses to be broken. In the end, Madison hadn't just survived, she had conquered, and her son would inherit not just wealth, but the knowledge that his mother had earned her place at the head of the table through intelligence, courage, and an unshakable refusal to let anyone else define her worth. The Sterling Empire was in excellent hands, and that's how Madison Sterling went from betrayed wife to CEO of a billion-dollar empire, proving that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's winning so completely that your enemies become footnotes in your success story. What did you think of Madison's transformation? Could you have survived what she went through? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these incredible stories. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button to help others discover these tales of ultimate justice. And hey, if you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell because we drop new stories of betrayal, revenge, and triumph every week. Share this with someone who needs to hear that no matter how dark things get, strong people don't just survive, they rise. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the quiet strength of someone who's been pushed too far.